Everything we do as human beings on the planet and our shockingly short lifespan is about trade-offs, and we should accept that. So are we willing to give up the freedom from measles in order to have freedom from being vaccinated? Or are we willing to accept the minor inconvenience of a measles vaccine in order to have freedom from measles? These are all different forms of freedoms. In our society, over the past many decades, we have collectively opted to give up a little bit of freedom. A little bit of freedom means allowing ourselves to get a small jab in order to have freedom from measles as a society. I think the vast majority of us agree that's a trade-off that's worth making. I don't think that the data suggests that the number of people who are willing to get measles is appreciably large. I just don't think that's the case. I think there are very few loud and prominent people who are making the case that that's the kind of freedom that they're willing to promote. But in truth, they themselves and their children are vaccinated. So I actually think we have to be very careful about not overprivileging this notion that there are legions of Americans who want to get measles. I don't think that's true.
Every time there's a new administration, there's new priorities. So we have this opportunity where we're being mandated to consider what would make it healthier again, but what would be the process by which we would actually make America healthier again?
Well, I think you would have to go back to first principles and say what makes us healthy, what makes us sick. And what makes us healthy is the world around us. It's the food we eat, the water we drink, the conditions of where we live, whether or not we have livable wages, whether or not we have opportunities to balance our work and our life. One needs to ask what those conditions are. And once you understand that that's what drives health, then it is acting on those conditions that makes us healthy. So how do we make America healthy? We'll make America healthy by creating a world that generates health. And many of us have been writing about this for decades. So the arrival of an administration with a catchy slogan is good. It's good to have a slogan. That's fine. And I'm all for the slogan of making America healthy. I've been writing about that for a quarter century, and I embrace it.
I don't know how much a government can do to actually implement that. It's sort of like you think about the problem. At the core of it, there has to be a will for people to want to do that. You need some exercise, you need some food, you need to, what are the things we need? What's the practical road to actually doing it?
Well, I think the practical road is recognizing that all sectors, all social structures, all contribute to health. And asking the question, if we care about health as a shared value, which arguably we do. There's so many shared values that actually cut across partisan lines, generations. Everybody wants to be healthy. And if we actually are serious about that, then to say, how is this action we are taking as a society, be it at the municipal level, the state level, at the federal level, how is that affecting our health? How is it affecting our health if we make decisions at the federal level that affect transportation and carbon emissions? How is it affecting our health if we make decisions about who has access to high quality healthcare? How is it affecting our health as we make decisions about the type of cities that we are building? How is it affecting our health as we make decisions about opportunities for people to age in place in a healthy way? And asking that question. Now, there are times when we're going to say the price is too high, the cost is too high. We don't want to make that investment. We're willing to sacrifice our health for it. And that's maybe okay, as long as it is subject to open, transparent conversation in society. And I think in most cases, we will agree that we're willing to pay quite a high price to create a society that generates health.
Do we have lessons we've learned from COVID? Do we have failures we can take forward? Do we have successes we can take forward?
I hope we learned from COVID, because if we didn't learn from COVID, it was truly compounding a tragedy. I think we learned from COVID that health is a means to an end, that people want to be healthy so they can live, and that people are not willing to be restricted in their living as a choice to be healthy. And I think that's reasonable, and I think that is something that we should bear in mind. So our job in creating health is to create a world where everybody can live rich, fulfilling lives. And that means that this investment in health that we're talking about is an investment in achieving the kind of freedom and prosperity that certainly the current administration, but really all administrations, see as what they're trying to bring about for the country. Health is at the heart of that. And without health, there's nothing else, because everything is postcedent to health.
You kind of alluded to some of the key factors that create a healthy society, but if you could kind of just start over, how do you begin to think about a system of health, well-being, opportunity? What do we need? Because we all need access to certain things in order for us to be healthy, right? We need some fairness, equity. But what would be some of the details in designing an overhaul in a healthcare system?
I would start by saying that we needed an overhaul of our system that generates health, not just healthcare. Healthcare is one part of that. We need to make sure everybody has equitable access to healthcare and that everybody has access to treatments that can restore us to health if we're sick. Yes. But coming to the generation of health, you need to make sure that you have adequate assets to promote health in your life. And that means financial assets, social assets, physical assets. Talking about financial, people need to have livable wages and savings that actually can create buffers, be that their own savings or social safety nets for moments of crisis. Moving to physical assets, you need to have a safe place, stable housing. You need to be able to have transportation to be able to get back and forth from work. You need to make sure you have physical opportunities for your children to go to school. And social assets, you need to have a community, people to look after you when you're sick, people to be able to provide you with resources if you're having moments of challenge. These are all the assets that generate health. And many of them are amenable to policy interventions, to creating a world that generates them.
We're sort of moving into a time where it feels, at least, that there's a contradiction between freedom and public health. We see outbreaks of measles in the United States. We haven't seen those in quite some time. Do we have to give up something to have herd immunity against measles and other outbreaks, or do we just have to let everybody have freedom at this point?
Well, everything we do as human beings on the planet and our shockingly short lifespan is about trade-offs, and we should accept that. So are we willing to give up the freedom from measles in order to have freedom from being vaccinated? Or are we willing to accept the minor inconvenience of a measles vaccine in order to have freedom from measles? These are all different forms of freedoms. In large part, in our society, over the past many decades, we have collectively opted to give up a little bit of freedom. A little bit of freedom means allowing ourselves to get a small jab in order to have freedom from measles as a society. I think the vast majority of us agree that's a trade-off that's worth making.
That's the vast majority of us, but it's not everybody anymore, and it seems to be growing every day. So does that point at conflict to come?
I don't think that the data suggests that the number of people who are willing to get measles is appreciably large. I just don't think that's the case. I think there are very few loud and prominent people who are making the case that that's the kind of freedom that they're willing to promote. But in truth, they themselves and their children are vaccinated. So I actually think we have to be very careful about not overprivileging this notion that there are legions of Americans who want to get measles. I don't think that's true.
I think that you've talked about, the limitations of when we focus too much on an individual's responsibility and health. What is the role of the individual, and how do we tap into sort of the policies, or what can the individual do, or what do you think the role is in sort of one's own health and public policy and public health?
I think individuals have a real role to play. I think at the end of the day, none of these things that we're talking about that are the assets and the resources in the world around us become health without passing through our individual experiences, exposures, and behaviors. So individuals have a key role to play. At the end of the day, you choose what to eat and whether to eat or not. You choose what to drink, how much to drink. You choose who to interact with. Of course, these choices, as we know, are deeply socially structured and structured over life experiences, exposures across generations. But at the end of the day, there remains a choice. So it is not a binary between individual responsibility and the context within which we are thrust. It is a bit of both. And I think it's a mistake to ever dichotomize and say it's one or the other. It's both.
It's both. And also, maybe people don't have access to the information, or, they may not have the same resources.
Of course, because the notion of choice is predicated on this idea that we all have perfect information and we can all choose. But it is a false notion, which is why, of course, within societies, you have experts and you have people who are accountable to societies to help choose for us. Now, the balance between how much we let others choose for us and how much autonomy we leave for ourselves is critical, which is why in a highly functioning society, you always have autonomy at the heart of everything we do. And you can relabel autonomy, say human rights. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It says the individual and making sure that the individual can live her, their, his choice of rich, fulfilled life is central to what we do. Having said that, that individual, or I, Priscilla, it is impossible for us to know everything and understand everything. Let me take a concrete example. How well do you know the literature, the scientific literature, about your greater risk of dying in an area with a speed limit of 55 versus 45 versus 35? I bet not very well. You know what? Neither do I. At the end of the day, we are trusting, you and I, that experts and elected accountable officials are balancing the risks and benefits correctly in determining a speed limit. And we recognize at some gut level, right, the faster you go, the less safe you are. But we without thinking about it, we know that somebody's making a calculus for us to balance the risks and benefits. That is just one concrete example. And we do that in our society all the time. And that is why some of the current partisan shibboleths about saying there can be no expert opinion, it should all be left up to the individual, are nonsense. Likewise, it is nonsense on the other side to say, oh, the individual has no role in it because all our choices are created for us by our social circumstances. These are extreme positions that have no bearing on our real lived experience. And they are not helpful to advance a nuanced conversation. We should be better than that.
So we actually wanted to ask you this question. We were discussing this morning. Should politics be out of the conversation of health and public health?
Well, I don't think politics can ever be out of conversation. I mean, insofar as health is about creating a world that generates health, it is a political conversation. I mean, the question of where to set a speed limit is a political question, right? The question is, what do you mean by politics? Politics is ultimately our collective approach to determining how we allocate resources. And resources means everything. It means finances, it means time in the context of speed limits. So these things are political, but political does not have to mean partisan. And political does not have to mean ideological. Political can mean having the wisdom to balance risks and benefits, to balance trade-offs in a way as to create a society that most closely resembles what most of us would like it to be, that advances the health for as many of us as possible.
In the conversation of the slogan, have we ever been, from your perspective, let's say the last 25, 30 years, has this country, let's just start with the United States, have we been healthy and we need to make healthy again? Or is that an illusion? And should we really think about making America healthy, like for real this time, which is inclusive?
No, the US has fallen behind compared to other high-income countries for the past since the 80s, since late 80s, early 90s. So that's 40 years. So, I mean, we were healthier then insofar as other high-income countries had themselves not gotten themselves healthy. Now they have, and we've been largely stagnating. I mean, we're about 5 years behind in life expectancy compared to other high-income countries. I mean, this is not a 2025 reality or a 2010 reality. It's been around for 30, 40 years. I have written things like talking about the need for a health new deal, the need for reimagining how we structure the country in order to create better health. So if the new administration is serious about engaging that, I'm delighted. And I think we should welcome it with open arms. I don't think, by the way, that part of a serious re-engagement of that is allowing misinformed people to choose measles.
Yes, I think that's right.
We don't often know where to stand on some of these healthier questions as people don't exactly know what food should be eaten. It's obvious in a food desert. Me and Priscilla have worked in some of those where it's like a child doesn't know what a vegetable is. That's an obvious problem, but it sort of gets into that playground to prison pipeline thing where you need to do 10 things at the same time in order to affect a better life for a child. Is it a similar problem with health?
Well, I think there are all sorts of things, Jesse, that you and I intersect with that we don't know enough about, and we trust that there are systems around us that create it for us. I mean, for example, when you read food labels, they have, it says this and this and it, and I don't understand much of most of that, neither do you, I bet. And you're like, okay, look, there's a system of approval that I trust that people are looking out for it. So we, as a healthy, mature society, have created, and it would be at our peril to dismantle it, a system of expertise that helps generate a world around us that keeps us safe and that promotes our health. Now, that is quite flawed, and it's nowhere near as good as can be, but certainly a way to improve it is not by dismantling it.
You said something really interesting. So, okay, we have systems, we rely on experts. Let's just take food ingredients, you mentioned, is an interesting one. And then we're still very far behind other countries. We still allow certain seed oils, preservatives, red dye, this, that, and the other thing. Who has been in charge of that part of the public health conversation that have not taken enough action to say, wait a minute, this isn't healthy? I'm trying to reconcile this conversation where everybody is questioning everything and everything is being challenged. But some of the experts, have they not been honest with the public, or where is the disconnect? Because good people must be working in some of those good science people, right, that have the evidence. I mean, do you have any knowledge about why they would be so long in restricting certain ingredients that might be unhealthy?
I think these organizations have extended people. I think they have people who have given their lives to at the FDA to trying to create a structure that regulates food, devices, drugs, and other products. I think people at CDC have spent a life trying to create a society where we are monitored for infectious disease, for outbreaks, where we regulate the food that we eat, the water that we drink, where we actually have programs to increase information to reduce risk for chronic disease. So I think we have those organizations. I think we are at a moment in time where there seems to be a new administration-driven effort to remove capacity from those organizations that I think we should keep an open mind and say there might be potential for improvement and efficiency in those organizations, certainly. I haven't heard anybody make the argument that the function these organizations serve, namely making us all healthy, is not a desirable outcome. In fact, the slogan for the administration seems to be "Make America Healthy." So there is a dissonance between the actions, which is, I suppose, from an economist's point of view, it's the revealed preference versus the stated preference. I would like those two to be aligned.
A little while ago, you said if you had the opportunity, would love to kind of lay forth some of your thinking of all the work that you've done over these many, many years. Can you talk us through some of those ideas? How would you begin to take on this problem? And where do you start? And I know for you, prevention is obviously a big piece of your thinking, but how do we design right now in this moment?
I think we have, as a country, an unhealthy, so to speak, skepticism of learning from other countries. And so labeling that and then taking a step back, we can see countries that have done things. For example, New Zealand passed a wellness budget where essentially they aligned all their sectors with a shared goal of making the country as healthy as can be. And they asked all sectors to say, how is it that what you're doing contributes to health? You in the transportation sector, you in the finance sector, you in the housing and urban development sector. How is it that what you're doing is harming or helping society? And that is a way of aligning and creating what I've called a Health New Deal, a compact with America, that we are aligning the functions of government to deliver something that we all care about, which is health, which I come back to the current administration. The current administration has sensed this, as evidenced by their expressed goal to make America healthy, parenthetically again. And I am here to take them at their word that they mean that. And if they mean that, they have at their disposal the tools to do it.
AI, is there an ethical line around using AI as an observational tool to sort of understand these statistics in a better way and improve health?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are ethical lines for all tools. I think all tools are ultimately going to get more and more sophisticated. We're going to use them more and more. We're going to get familiar with them more and more. Well, until we get such familiarity, we should have guardrails to make sure there's not abuse and misuse. But I think it's a mistake to ever think that we can stop progress in the use of any tool. And I'm hopeful that in time, AI will be part of our armamentarium in how we promote health.
We have talked to a lot of doctors who are using AI specifically as a companion for their diagnosis and things like that. I mean, I'm looking for the positive ways that it can really accelerate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been an enormous acceleration of research about how AI can be applied in clinical settings and as well as in broader public health settings, but also cautions about the challenges. In balance, I think AI is a powerful tool that in time will work into what we do. But what it's not is a panacea. You cannot AI your way out of health gaps, just like you cannot app your way out of health gaps.
You referenced one model about using sort of the values that we believe the society has and then putting money toward those values, creating these systems that can promote health. Are there other places that you've traveled so much and you've been in some pretty hard, war-torn countries as well, but any other models where you feel like we should be pulling in? And I totally agree with you. I think we both do. We should be looking around and have a worldview about what works, what are best practices.
Yeah, I'm often asked about, is there a country we should be like? And my answer is no, I don't think there's any one country we should be like, because America is a very particular country. It's just like all countries are. Also a very big, diverse, heterogeneous country. But I do think we can learn from other places. We can learn from what places have done in terms of social safety nets. We can learn from what other countries have done in terms of creating pathways for healthier aging. We can learn from what countries have done in terms of providing services for youth and mental health challenges. We can learn from other countries as to what they've done to make sure that as many people as possible have affordable, livable housing. So I do think that we can learn from other places. And it seems to me foolish to say that we have the answer to everything. We don't say that when it comes to technology, for example. As soon as another country develops a technological approach that we haven't yet come up with here, what do? We quickly learn from it, adapt, and innovate, right? Why would we not do the same with health?
What is healthy? How do you define healthy?
I define healthy as the ability for everybody to live full, rich lives doing what they would like to do. Health is a means to people living their lives as they wish to, unencumbered by physical, mental limitations.
Now, why did you get involved in this work? What is driving you to do this?
What could be more important than be part of the work that makes sure that as many people as possible can live as healthy as possible? Why isn't everybody involved in this work?
Well, I think you're right, and we all should be engaged in some way. We can do things, though, right? It goes back to Jesse's question. People don't always know now, and there's been so much discourse and vile conversation, frankly, all over the place. Like, how do we get people to trust, to read, to understand what they're reading? Where do we go for information around health and well-being? We're flooded, and we're also flooded with a lot of misinformation. So from your perspective, with your expertise, how do we guide a person if they're looking to make those choices that you just described, best possible life that one could have for themselves and their family?
Well, I think the more conversations like this one we can have, the better, right? Because we are trying to center a conversation about how to generate a healthy world. We want people to engage in these conversations so that people are better informed and so that people are then better able to make choices. It is about allowing people the space to make choices around things that we can make choices about. There are many things which I can't make choices about, neither can you, Priscilla, neither can Jesse, because we're not expert enough and they require a whole body of knowledge, and we trust that others are making those choices for us. We elect officials to be accountable, to keep an eye on those choices. That's fine, but it's a balance between those choices and leaving us the space, abundant space to make choices.
What keeps you up at night right now?
I think it's a deeply unsettled time. I think there are challenges to the infrastructure that generates health that has held up imperfectly for a long time. And I worry that what's going right now is going to make our health worse. While in 2019, I wrote about the need for us to rethink how we generate health, and I think that was correct then. I think it remains correct now, and I don't want to see us go backwards. I want to see us go forwards. And right now, I feel like there's a disconnect between a rhetorical aspiration to move forward and a expressed set of actions that, as I have seen them so far, do not hold promise that they're going to move us forward on health.
Are you optimistic?
I think optimism, to quote a Canadian scientist, is a form of political resistance, and I think it's better than the alternative. So yes, I'm optimistic.